By the middle of 1864, the Union's black troops, once so scorned, were already receiving high praise, even from their rebel foes, for their steely courage under fire. How had this happened? Much of it can be traced back to the stellar performance of one particular infantry regiment, the 22nd U.S. Colored Troops. As described in segment 3 of the website, the 3rd USCT Regiment and its 3 Waverly men performed ably at Charleston. But it was the mighty 22nd USCT with 6 men from Waverly that would truly change American attitudes about black bravery. Look at this painting. It depicts those infantrymen of the 22nd charging toward Confederate cannon batteries as the enemy blasted away at them. 3 times that day, at 3 different places, the 22nd charged uphill under withering fire, and each time they captured cannons and drove the rebels away. This was at Petersburg, Virginia, during a marathon day of battle in which the 22nd saw 18 of its men killed in action, and 143 men, including 3 from Waverly, wounded. The next day, their commanding general sought them out to praise them for, quote, their courage and dash, and promised to, quote, send them in a difficult place as readily as the best white troops, end quote. So who were these 1,000 brave men of the 22nd? Most were volunteers from Philadelphia and New Jersey, with a smattering from elsewhere, including the 6 from Little Waverly. They were fugitives and free blacks, fathers and sons, some strapping, some ragtag, and all green in battle. After a hard month's training at the boot camp outside Philadelphia, they received their special battle standard, a bold silk flag that shows a black soldier holding a shocked rebel officer at bayonet point. Its motto is equally bold, the Latin phrase, sic semper tyrannis, meaning thus always to tyrants. As the men shipped out, they were allowed to march through central Philadelphia. Some whites heckled them along the route, which must have only added to the fire in their bellies. Soon afterward, they were in Virginia, near the giant Fortress Monroe, shown here. They became part of the massive army operation called the Overland Campaign, whose goal was to choke off the rebel capital of Richmond. The 22nd's first mission was to construct and defend 2 earthwork forts to protect Union boat traffic along the strategic James River. During this period, some of the men also went on raids into the Virginia countryside to harass plantations and free slaves. On one unforgettable occasion, several newly freed slaves had the opportunity to publicly whip a local plantation owner who had whipped them in the past. The Union general in charge called this, quote-unquote, poetical justice, and the fugitive slave soldiers in his ranks must have agreed. A battle cry for the USCT troops by then was, "Remember Fort Pillow." This was a reference to the recent methodical massacre of several hundred black soldiers who had surrendered to the rebels in Tennessee at a place called Fort Pillow. The 22nd got its first taste of battle at one of its James River forts. The men kept their cool under fire and managed to repulse a force of rebel cavalry led by Robert E. Lee's nephew, Fitzhugh Lee. And then, on June 15, 1864, came the regiment's historic Marathon Day of Battle. The regiment joined a large brigade of black troops and marched out in the middle of the night toward Petersburg. Their mission was to attack the rebel defense lines that guarded the city and its all-important supply lines up to Richmond. At daybreak, at a place called Baylor's Farm, they suddenly came under fire from an advance force of rebels hidden on a wooded slope. The black troops fell into battle ranks, charged upwards, and took heavy casualties under ferocious fire. Some of the men broke and ran, some huddled, but others, including the 22nd, kept pressing forward. Soon the forward troops, including the 22nd, overran the trenches and seized the rebel cannons. They tossed their caps high and shouted in victory, as shown in this engraving from the Harper's Weekly newspaper. It was what one military historian termed, quote, the first successful charge by African American soldiers in the Eastern Theater of Operations, end quote. But the day was still young. The 22nd was ordered to move on toward the rebels' main defense line. Once they drew near to the line, they came under fire again, from the front and the side this time. For 5 long hours under the June sun, the men had to lie low, exposed on the field, crawling forward when they could, inch by inch, under steady shot and shell. Quote, there could be no severer test of soldiers, particularly for green troops, end quote, wrote one battlefield correspondent. Finally, around dinner time, a nearby white regiment managed to penetrate its part of the long rebel line. The 22nd was ordered to press the advantage. They surged forward directly uphill and would not stop. Quote, nothing less than the pen of horror could begin to describe the terrific roar and dying yells of that awful yet masterly charge and daring feat, end quote, recalled a regimental chaplain. A squad that included 3 Waverly men broke through and managed to seize 3 cannons. And still they were not done. The commander of the 22nd spotted another cannon battery 600 yards ahead. The men would have to cross a low ravine and push uphill to capture the cannons. He ordered his tired men forward one more time. As he wrote in his battle report later, quote, my men wavered at first under the hot fire of the enemy, but soon, on seeing their colors on the opposite side of the ravine, pushed rapidly up and past the rifle pits and fort, end quote. The rebels fled, leaving another cannon behind. At that point, the charge finally ended. It was nearly dark, and the 22nd was low on ammunition. Among the wounded from that long day were 3 soldiers from Waverly, all fugitive slaves. John Washington was injured by an exploding shell. John Mason was shot through the hand, a disabling wound. William Bradley was injured by shrapnel and spent a long, painful night lying exposed on the field until his wound was finally tended the next day. The fortitude of the 22nd had been witnessed by white soldiers and reporters and made a deep impression. As one USCT chaplain wrote, June 15, 1864 was, quote, the day when prejudice died in the entire army of the U.S. of America. It is the day when it was admitted that colored men were equal to the severest ordeal, end quote. As it happened, it was also the very day Congress finally agreed to equalize pay with white troops. The 22nd kept up its amazing war record. It was embedded in the long, bloody siege of Petersburg that followed. The 22nd was also in the front lines of the nearby battles of Fair Oaks and New Market Heights, where it again took heavy casualties. And when Richmond fell to the Union, the 22nd was among the very first troops to enter the rebel capital. President Lincoln was assassinated 2 short weeks later, shocking the nation. As plans were made for the solemn funeral procession accompanying Lincoln's body from the White House to the Capitol, General Ulysses S. Grant asked his field officers to select a seasoned black regiment that would represent all black troops in the official procession. The 22nd was selected for this highest of honors and was placed first in line in the national procession up Pennsylvania Avenue. Afterwards, the 22nd was quickly deployed away to join the urgent hunt for Lincoln's assassin John Wilkes Booth, as depicted here. After their discharge in 1865, 5 of the 6 vets of the 22nd would return to Waverly. One would quickly succumb to his war wound. The rest lived out their years quietly, bearing their disabilities without medals or tribute, but they must have known that they had truly made their mark on history.